Thomas Zenteno is a visual development and concept artist living in Los Angeles, California. Throughout his experiences, he developed a voracious drive to push himself and learn as much as he could about the visual arts. He is currently working at Nickelodeon on their upcoming TV show, Middlemost Post. Please join us today as Thomas discusses his journey as an artist, his inspirations, and how he balances his workload with his passion for his advocacy work. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Paint It in Color podcast. I'm your co-host, Lauren Brown, and with me today are Esther, Mia, to interview our special guest, Thomas Zenteno. Thomas is a visual artist based in Los Angeles, and he's worked with such studios as Disney, Sony, The Void, and Faraday Future. So let's just get right into it. Thomas, how you doing today?
I'm good. Been just chilling all weekend. I've done some fun stuff this weekend. I held a Black Liberation teach-in yesterday with an organization I'm with, and
What?
we just did that in Pasadena. All masked up and stuff. But it was cool to meet the community, meet some kids, make some new friends, and just have a good time. So
That's amazing. Wait, what is it like? It's a teach-in. So what
Mhm.
exactly do you do? Like, I'm
Oh man, we're
assuming.
sorry, we're going off track of art already.
Listen,
But
it's fun. I
It's
love this
part.
too.
It's
This is
part of it.
great. This is all
Yeah.
part of it.
Cool. So yeah, this weekend, so I'm an organizer with an organization called the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and I basically I care a lot about what you guys are doing here. I painted it in color, and I think as artists of color, as Black artists, we have to be able to engage our communities on that aspect too. So it's like outside of just the art and the individualistic side or like the business and financial side of things, like we have to be able to organize within our own communities. And so that's something I've actually been dedicating a lot of time to the last 9 months, I'd say.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's definitely really important to be able to elevate the community around us. Especially considering everything that's happening now is things that have been happening for such a long time, but like now that it's at such the forefront of our culture and just like what we're all going through collectively, and everybody's really become aware of it. It's like I think it's more important than ever to just be able to get yourself out there and get yourself active. So I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that kind of work. That's really awesome.
Yeah, we can get into that later though, I'm
Oh,
sure.
for sure. Yeah, like we're supposed to just be doing
You
like.
don't have to start there.
No, but I think that's great. So I mean, so really to get this to the beginning of it, I would love to just hear more about you and like just a brief overview of where you come from and your work, and just like how early you knew you wanted to become an artist.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, my name's Thomas Zenteno, and I grew up in Miami, Florida. My mom's Dominican and my dad's Bolivian. And growing up in Miami, there's all kinds of people there, so many different like cultures mixed together. So many languages. Grew up speaking Spanish and English, and then when I wanted to be an artist, like I always grew up drawing and probably had more of like a lean towards an artistic side pretty young, but I didn't really get into it until like end of middle school when I was like, oh, I can maybe take this more seriously. And there was a high school called Design and Architecture Senior High School, or DASH for short. And it's like a specialized magnet school where we do, they have like industrial design, fashion, all these kind of like majors that you can do in high school. And uh, yeah, I think when I went there, I actually didn't get in initially, and so I had to like apply. And I was like so confident. I was like, I got this. I'm like the best artist in my middle school or whatever, and I just got trashed. I looked at. I was like, I remember doing a figure drawing and like as a test or whatever, and looking around to my left and right, I'm like being like, oh man, I'm actually terrible. Like I don't know what I'm doing, and that was the first time I got to meet other artists who are like taking it again seriously. And when I eventually got into that school, I did again pretty poorly in my art classes for the first like year. And then I started taking it a lot more seriously in like 10th grade when I was like 15, 16. And I started taking industrial design seriously. And that's kind of where I developed a love for art and a dedication to drawing a lot and just having a lot of passion for it. So.
That's awesome. Do you think that the industrial design part lended to your really amazing environment work too?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love perspective. So I 2 point perspective, like learning it in middle school, I was like, oh, this is really fun. I can make like cubes and shapes or whatever. And then at Dash, we had to do really technical drawings of like product designs almost. And so we would take like a phone or an earpiece or something we designed, and then we would have to do like an exploded view. And this was something that would take 2 weeks to do, and we'd have these giant T squares and we'd be
Oh
plotting it all
wow.
out, like crossing up everything, dotting our I's and dotting our T's or whatever, and kind of mathematically design this perfect shapes or whatever, and just try and be as technical as possible. And so on one hand you had this like expressive, like painterly artistic side that I was getting also in my illustration classes there, but then on the technical side of the industrial design is like almost like a more of a science than like an art. And so that's what I liked about design. You could, you were being judged based on the success of your stated goal, right? So it wasn't just, oh, I'm creating a problem for myself to solve, but there's a problem that everybody has to solve, and now we have to approach this from our different perspectives and angles, and then we come to a consensus, and boom, we output something that should work and meet that stated goal. So
That's really cool. Yeah. That's something that I'm not good at all. So I'm really impressed with anybody who can really plot something out in like exploded views. Like I always love the way it looks, but
I
just like
can't do it anymore. So no, I'm just kidding.
is it like a thing where it's like you draw it and it might come back maybe, or is it just gone? Is it gone
No,
forever?
I still have that skill and that technique. It takes a little while to build up to it sometimes, but it's just not my preference to draw on my own personal art nowadays. So
Yeah, but I can still see a lot of that structure in your
mhm.
work too. Like I can definitely tell that you have some kind of background of drawing environments and being interested in environments, because like just the scenery and everything that you have is so strong. So,
Oh, thanks so
it
much.
yeah, I mean it. It's amazing. So, like I am curious about your other education as well, because you went to art center.
Hmm.
And I know it's a school that a lot of people talk about, and last time I talked about SCAD, and so I'd love to hear what your experience was with Art Center and like what other art schools are like around this country.
Yeah. So Art Center was a really interesting place. I don't know. It has its ups and downs, and I think with every school, we've seen recently in a lot of the conversations coming up around schools, the bureaucracy and the structure can often be a hindrance to safety for students. And I think coming out the other end of it, that's something I wish I could have emphasized and kind of organized more around when I was in school, and been more in the know about, and just pushed for, student safety and better, working conditions really. I think Art Center overall, I really like the education, but I also have the personality that is kind of built for that structure. So I've had a lot of friends, dear friends of mine, who Art Center was just not the right place for them to be at, especially at that stage in their lives. And it's unfortunate for me personally. I was kind of prepared for what Art Center mentality and work-life balance was going to be like, which was basically nothing. It's like all Art Center all the time, and it's extremely, again, unhealthy. We all laugh, but it's like, looking back, it's something I wish I could have pushed back on in some ways. So and that's just like unlearning and relearning throughout our lives, right? But
Yeah.
um just some self-critique, I guess. But Art Center, okay, so Art Center as a school itself, again, really stretched me, really pushed me. I actually started in product design and then switched majors to entertainment design, and I was lucky enough to get a full scholarship for product. And then when I switched to entertainment, that actually carried over.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, I got really lucky. And when I made that switch, I kind of got to combine all my loves of kind of like what I talked about, illustration, the industrial design aspect, and kind of mix all those together into entertainment design. And I really enjoyed that program. I met a lot of good people, a lot of people who are like amazing in the industry right now, from Justin Oaksford to Amanda Jolly, and like so many people who had like a huge influence on me, not just as like an artist, but as a person. And I think
Yeah.
that's one area where like schools can differ from like an online class, let's say, is like you're meeting people that are going to be in the industry as well. And so when somebody like Seifel, who's a friend of mine, Seifel Hawk, he, does really well or gets a good job. If he's too busy, he can send me a job. If I'm too busy, I can send a job to, one of my former students or to somebody I'd recommend, a friend or something like that. And it's just how small the industry is, right? Like just the same way that you and me, Lauren, kind of bumped into each other. It's like, that's just how the industry is going to go. And so when you find people who are very serious about this and want to take it seriously at a place like Art Center, it's like, it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to build that, like, again, community and build those friendships that hopefully last forever. So
Yeah.
Outside of that though, like it always comes to price tag, right? So I applied to multiple design colleges when I was in high school. Art Center was my number one choice. And really, I probably would have had to end up going wherever gave me the most scholarship. And I was lucky enough to get a full scholarship to Art Center when I was coming out of high school. And so, I kind of worked pretty hard on that portfolio and did a lot of stuff to get to that point. But at the same time, it's something that if you're unable to get that level of scholarship, I don't know if it's worth it. It's like, I think Bobby Chiu compares it to like buying a Ferrari, right? If you can afford to do that, go for it. And it's like, I got a free Ferrari, it's like, I got to go there for tuition free. I was still taking out loans and stuff for my living expenses and stuff.
Oh.
But I came out of there relatively debt free, and I played my cards as best I could, but for my students, I encourage them to do the same. So like for other students coming up into the industry, I usually recommend getting a job in the industry first and then going to school to refine those skills. So if you can get like an internship or build connections in the industry first, that way, like, school's not necessary, right? You don't need a degree to get a job anywhere, right? It's mostly the portfolio that's going to be the main eye catcher, and then your personality is going to carry you through that interview, and hopefully, your reputation is also going to carry you through with people wanting to work with you over and over again. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, you said a lot of really good stuff there. It's actually interesting too, because when they were talking to me as well, I also talked about the benefit of just this industry being so small, and the amount of people that you meet at your school are probably going to be people that you will end up seeing throughout the industry. And to call back to the story that that I told before we got on air, for people who are listening, basically, I had posted a listing for a concept artist position at my studio, and I was looking on the Drawing While Black hashtag on Twitter and found Thomas's work, and I was immediately like, "This is amazing! I think this person would be awesome if they worked for us." And so I messaged him on Twitter, and then later on Facebook, I checked my messages and I got a request from Thomas completely independently of my message that I sent to him, and say, hey, like he was saying, hey, a friend had posted that you're like listed this job, like, I'm interested in applying. And I'm like, what? Hold on. Wait a minute. This is before I reached out to you. So it's really interesting about how small this industry is. So I always thought that was funny. I was like, that's a really interesting way to meet somebody.
yeah. I don't think I've ever had that happen to me before, that it's like that synced up,
Oh yeah.
And now I'm here, so.
Yeah, now you're here, and I'm really happy about that. I'm also curious too about a little bit more about your experience at Art Center. You had mentioned briefly about just like kind of like the like unhealthy working environments, or just like the things that you went through as a student. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what was it like to do the work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because a lot of people in this industry want to reach the top really quickly, and the advice is often, burn yourself out, right? Like, work so hard that you hurt your body physically, that you hurt your mind mentally, that you're in a really bad spot when you come out the other end of it. And I wish, teachers would emphasize balance more. And I think many of us have the luxury as industry professionals to sit with a job, with money. We don't have to worry about rent always. I know a lot of people are still in a tough situation with, like, it varies, right? Some people are struggling with rent, some people are struggling with student loans, and no matter where you're at, like, it's stressful, right? And I think there is a certain sector of, people or industry professionals who are like, can't imagine going back to being a student and seeing, the damage that gets done through like one piece of advice that somebody takes very seriously and then applies it literally, and so I think with the tough working conditions, I think for me, like I did burn out, right? I think for my first like 3 semesters at Art Center, I was staying up super late. I was disorganized. I was thinking I just need to work harder, not smarter. And so I was constantly pressuring myself. And this all culminated in me almost failing a class because I was like late to the final. My work was terrible. My midterm stuff was better, and like I could just see immediately like my time management had to change. I needed to get more sleep, and it was kind of like a real wake up call for me. And so from that point, I just said, okay, I'm going to sleep as much as I need to until I feel rested, and I'm just going to get as much done as I can when I wake up. And so I just started being much more focused with my time and doing more work and better work in 6 hours than I would like over 16 hours, whereas like, half-heartedly doing it while just burning myself out physically. So
yeah.
So would you say that actually going through art school and that experience actually helped basically help figure out how to actually time manage? Yeah.
Mhm.
Like for actually like the rest of your life /
Mhm.
career up to this point, where you're like, even though it is school, like it
Mhm.
was the wake up call to be like, this is my natural habit and I
Mhm.
can't continue this. Is that, would you say that that's also like
Yeah.
a lesson you learned?
I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because that work schedule was like encouraged by the environment, right? And I think still is encouraged by that environment, even when it's saying, be time managed, be organized. We would have students who would get into accidents every single year because they were low on sleep, and that's something that happened to me when I was interning right after that 3rd semester that I talked about. I was interning at Warner Brothers at the time, and they weren't paying me, so I was freelancing on the weekends. So I was doing 4 days a week for them, and then Friday through Sunday I was like doing freelance. And so I ended up getting into an accident myself on the highway
Oh my
because
goodness.
I was burning myself out too much. And again, these are other aspects of like it's almost like whiplash or something, and I think that's a good like cautionary tale of like, a lot of people view whiplash and they're like, oh wow, I need to work harder. And it's like, yes, but it's also like a horror story. It's like, and this is again something we want people to push themselves, but we don't want you to push the point of like breaking. And so again, I don't know, I'll keep repeating it till I die. It's a balance.
Glad you're okay. Holy crap.
Yeah, no,
sure
I mean
too.
it all worked out, and again, I've just had friends be in bad situations because again, it's like at Art Center you're working on 4 studio classes, probably 2 academics if you're doing the full aspect, and like those 4 classes all feel really important. You kind of have to prioritize them, but each of them could really realistically be an assignment in themselves. So like I think the toughest class I took at Art Center, Architecture 2, was like, I think I would spend about like 24 to 30 hours a week on just that one studio class. And then I had the other 3 classes could barely keep up. Like I was like doing the minimal for them because I was pouring everything I had into that one class. So
Goodness. Did you have to load your schedule that tight? Like, was it
if you want to
necessary?
graduate in 8 terms and save money,
Yeah.
you have to do about 4 studios a year at Art Center. So yeah, or sorry, 4 studios a term. So.
Yeah. Goodness, that's intense.
Mhm.
But you made it out.
Yeah.
You made it out, and and then you started working in the industry. So I'm curious about what that transition was like for you from school to actually getting into your first job.
Mhm. That's a good question. I think a lot of students struggle graduating from school and then starting to build those relationships. For me personally, I always advocate for building those relationships, as I mentioned, if you can, before school. So again, I'd reference somebody like Justin Oaksford, who was somebody who interned for a game studio before going to Art Center and then getting a job at 343 coming out of it. In my case, I started doing my first freelance jobs in my 3rd semester of Art Center, I think. So it was probably like as I was coming through like halfway of Art Center, I guess end of sophomore year, I was doing internships, and that's where I met somebody like Chris McKay, who later went on to direct the Lego Batman, and that was like my first job coming out of school. So building those relationships and starting to work as soon as you're ready, really, I think is a good thing, because you can kind of, like Esther said, like make those mistakes in school or make those mistakes on like early jobs and kind of learn the ropes of what do I need to do to be a working professional in this industry. So I did a lot of small freelance jobs. They progressively got larger. I had a lot of teachers and other students give me my first big jobs. And I think one of the first jobs I did that was a good one was like a Disney Channel's Descendants on the first one. And so my production designer, Mark Hoffling, saw my portfolio. He reached out to me, and he hired me on every single show he's worked on since. So
that's awesome.
It's been really fun to work on. Like, I think I worked on like 5 or 6 Disney Channel movies with him. So
oh wow,
Nice.
that's amazing.
yeah, it's super fun.
Yeah, also to work on Lego Batman as your first like job out of school is just incredible. What was the environment like? I don't know how much you're allowed to talk about like the actual in-studio environment. Yeah.
So I worked at Animal Logic. So that's a studio. They're based in Australia. They actually flew me out to Sydney, and I got to live there for 6 months while I was color scripting. And so while I was there, I did some traveling, went to New Zealand, met a lot of cool people, ate a lot of good food.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it was really shocking that was like, again, the timing worked out for my first gig. And again, I'd been working freelance jobs all the way up until then, and kind of I felt secure enough to start my career, but to have something like a feature film drop into my lap like that right as I was graduating couldn't have been better. So
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, you
Um,
talk about travel now too, and I'm just like, I want to go. I want to go so bad.
I was lucky enough to make it to Japan last year for my anniversary. So right around this time last year, I was in Japan. So that was like pre-corona. I was like, got really fortunate with that too.
Yeah.
But you want to hear about like the work studio environment, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
So I think when I got to Australia, I found a place to live, got all set up, and when I went to the studio, it's on a lot, and so there's like some, I don't know, it's almost like themed facades and stuff. I walk in, get all set up on my badge and stuff. And when I sit at my desk, I start working, get my first assignments, and there's like a giant spider crawling on the wall right next to me. And I was like, oh, this is how it's going to be for the next 6 months. Luckily, it was the only spider I really saw.
Was it one of those huntsmen?
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what it was. It was probably just like a wolf spider or something. I don't know.
Yikes.
But, as far as the conditions there, it was great. We had like a little breakfast area, which was great for me coming out of school. I was like, oh great, free food, like and then we had a nice relationship with a gym there, so I was able to get a discount at this gym, and so I started working out while just going, like every day after work I would just go work out. And I got assigned to color scripting. So that was my first job out of school. And I was just playing with color and light. And it was just delivering as much as I could as fast as possible, really. So we would get storyboards, and then I would just immediately start color keying all these frames. And the studio itself was like pretty organized. I feel like we had our little art team for Lego Batman, which was about like 8 people, and my production designer Grant Freckleton was really good. My art director was Vivian Toe, and so they both really helped me grow my cinematography knowledge. I think that was the biggest thing I learned there, and just meeting also a lot of Australian artists that like we don't really get to hear about in the States. I feel like it's just kind of separated with the distance, and so there's so many good artists out there. Matt Haddon, Gibson, yeah, maybe I can link them later or something.
Yeah, I would love to have just like more links to people's profiles and stuff. I always love discovering new people, especially from the other side of the world as well. So it's a shame that we don't get to hear about them more, but But yeah, let me know about those names.
Yeah, I
It would be
will.
nice to plug them later, for sure. All right. Yeah. I think, I mean, that sounds fantastic, honestly. Like, it seems like a really, really cool environment to work in. And also in Australia to live abroad for a little bit, which I know a lot of people really want to do. Um, did you have to do anything special for that, by the way? I'm just curious, like for myself,
I
honestly.
mean, they supplied me with like the visa papers and stuff, and like got me situated. I still had to fill out and like apply to certain things, but it went pretty smoothly. The U.S. passport is pretty powerful, so it was pretty smooth to go from here to there
That's
overall.
amazing. Yeah. And so then after you return back to the States from working there, what then? What next?
Ooh, okay, so that's a fun story because I was dating long distance that whole time. So my wife, she got a really good job in Utah.
Oh.
And so I moved out to Utah. We weren't married at the time. I just said, you know, I want to be with you. So I moved out to Utah. I can work from anywhere with good internet. And so I just started freelancing from there. And it was probably about 4 or 5 years of freelancing where I think I was struggling to really start my career. And that's something that's interesting because it's like I recently moved back to LA about a year and a half
Mm-hmm.
ago. And it's almost like another restart to my career. A lot of people are like, I'm going like grabbing dinner with friends or whatever, meeting up with old friends, and they're like, "Oh, I thought you were still in Australia this whole time." I was like, "No,
Oh
I'm posting
wow.
art. I'm living in Utah. Like, I'm not. If I'm not in LA, I just don't exist, right?" So,
Yeah. You're not in the center of that bubble,
yeah,
so
yeah,
they're just
exactly.
like you're not here, whatever.
So
Australia, sure.
coming back to LA has been another restart. So it's just interesting to see. It's like these segments of like how I interact with the art community and how I interact online versus in person is just it's different. And I definitely encourage, if you're interested in a career in entertainment, I think LA is probably one of the best places to be to meet a lot of people who are like-minded.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, a lot of people that I had known from SCAD also moved over to the West Coast, and I didn't follow them. Part of it was just like intimidation of just like the cost of everything there. And like I just like I was able to find a home in Austin just fine. But I am curious about like what the experience is like of living in LA because I know that a lot of students are really curious about it. And they assume that they probably have to go over there. So just want to know what that's like.
Moving to LA, I think it can be tough, right? Like anything, it's an expense. And I think that's one thing that I learned as an artist in this industry is like I struggled for the first few years getting work consistently. So I could get, one good job, two good jobs, and then like they would, because they were freelance or contract, they would end. And then I'd be like, oh, well, now I got to start all over and find another job, right? And so it's like this constant grind. And I think this is where having money and coming from a family with money is beneficial, right? It's like if you are struggling to make rent or struggling to eat, like there's no way you can last long enough to build up that reputation. And so that's something I wish could change in this industry. And I think that's also applicable to like students getting into colleges as well internationally. I also have a really big
Yeah.
internationalist lens. So like I want to see more stories and art from people all over the world, whether that's like from Algeria, Egypt, or like from Philippines, or I mean, there's so many good artists everywhere from Russia, wherever, and I want to see their stories. And I feel like these people just don't get a shot because, again, they don't have the connection here, and even having the ability to make a connection here in LA or to make it out to LA is like it's a luxury. It
Yeah.
really is. So.
Yeah, there's so many artists that I follow that are from different countries at this point, and I mean the work is just incredible. And
Mm-hmm.
each and from each place is like comes kind of a different aesthetic. It's not to put anybody in a box, but sometimes you can just like see like different themes. Like the European style has like a specific color use, and like there's like a Russian, the Russian artists have there's a kind of look to the character designs. I think it's so wonderful and gorgeous. And I'm glad that more studios are starting to become like in more of the forefront from different countries. And yeah, I just want to see more of that because I think it's really important to be able to hear other stories
Mm-hmm.
that are not just from the US, but just from everywhere. There's a really unique spin that can be gained from all of it. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. Um, for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, I think doubling off that, I think with COVID and everything going on during the pandemic, like I feel like studios are a little bit more open to hiring outside of local. So now's a really good time to be jumping into. Obviously, animation I think has been going really strong. It's really one of the only way to make films right now. You can't be shooting as much on set with live action. So and it's unfortunate for those projects that have been stalled, but at the same time, like from an animation perspective, I think the studios are a little bit more open to hiring outside of the local cities.
Oh yeah. Case in point, I mean, I was able to look everywhere for that concept artist position for people just all over the country, and it was actually really freeing to do so because there's so much great talent, and I love that. Like, I hate that the situation had to arise in order for it to become apparent, but this is an industry that really does benefit from being able to hire from anywhere because, like, as long as we have the equipment, we can work. We can continue to do the work, and I think that it's kind of an interesting shift to be able to see that come into more full focus of we can get somebody remote from anywhere, and as long as they can do that work, we're good to go. And so that kind of gets us like the best people and the best talent, and people can get more notice and more opportunities to be able to do what they need to do. So I really love that. Even though obviously, again, I hate this situation, but the animation industry, it's kind of shown how flexible it really can be. So I'm glad for that.
Yeah, I know it makes certain things harder, but I think from an art team perspective, we're one of the few teams that can actually deliver really well in this kind of situation. Notwithstanding, I still think, like, again, it's kind of wild that we're all working during this time period anyways, right? It's like California was literally on fire for these past few weeks, and there's still fires going on throughout the West Coast. So to be working in this kind of conditions, or even during a pandemic, I know the mental stress on me has been really high. So that's another aspect that we can talk about. But
oh yeah, I mean, I do want to talk about it. Like, I'm curious about like how you've been handling this whole situation and how it's changed for you, because I know that you've worked freelance, so you're used to working from home. But I'm curious about like how you navigate through all of this side gestures to the world, and how you keep yourself kind of like mentally above board with all of it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's one that I think a lot of people are looking for advice on, especially in these times. It's really trying. For me, I guess I have a kind of real interest in history and an analysis of, like, economic structures and stuff, and it's kind of wild to me that, especially in the US, as soon as the pandemic started, I was like, oh, we're going to be in a really bad spot because our healthcare system isn't really strong. We have a lot of people who are unable to access healthcare. We have a lot of people who are unable to access, rent, or be like, they might even be evicted because they can't afford like a $400 emergency, let alone getting fired, losing your health insurance, and then having the pandemic in the background. It's like, it's a lot to handle. And I was in a really rough spot at the beginning of this whole thing. I was applying to jobs as well, and it was really interesting because I was in talks for 2 art director positions, and also for like a few other just regular background design or background paint positions, and none of them panned out, right? I interviewed like 5 times, and like I went and this is something that happens, right? Like I went 5-6 months without work, and that was at the start of the pandemic. And eventually I ended up at Nickelodeon as a background painter, and it all worked out. But it's like during that time when I was unemployed, I think I was really focused on other people, actually. Like, I had enough savings, and I had enough, like, as a freelancer, you have to plan for these things. So I'm always in the back of my mind, like, ready for something to happen like that, where I know I might go through a bit of a drought work-wise. And so after that first like initial shock, I was able to, I had filed for unemployment and stuff. And so I was getting, a monthly like stipend essentially. And so I was still trying to help other people, right? I was like, that's what I turned my focus towards. And especially after the George Floyd protests kicked off, I really started getting a lot more. I was in the streets for a lot of that stuff. And here in California, we had here in Pasadena, actually, we had Anthony McClain got shot just a few blocks, from a park I was at yesterday, or at the park I was at yesterday. And so it's I don't know, like the way I deal with this is to try and fix the problem. And so the problems are really large and really global in scale. And so I'm doing my best to organize with like my community and the people around me to fix these problems. And I guess that's part of why I haven't really done a lot of personal art lately, because that's been at the forefront of my mind. And obviously I still do my professional work for my living and for my career. But that's kind of been my focus lately. So that's how I've been handling it, I guess, is like, I feel like I need to do something. And I kind of have been studying and researching for the last few years to see what can I do. And that's where I jumped in. Like when I was in Utah, I organized with like Black Lives Matter Utah.
Mhm.
When I came here to LA, I started organizing with the Party for Socialism and Liberation.
So that's interesting that you brought that up, because if we're asking about personal projects, it's like it's not just like your IP, it's not like your portfolio like version of like 300 posts, like your blue period. It's, hey, I'm trying to give right, I'm trying to give back to my community, and that's actually right my personal project. And that's pretty interesting, because like I feel that like I can say, coming from New York and then just bouncing around, like I've never had a lot of opportunities until I really settled in down in LA to actually look at, oh, hey, I can, do this charity, I can do that. And sometimes that's not even open for like artists or other people. So I was wondering if, like you're saying you're the one who basically founded these, and you took the initiative. What's your advice for people that want to do that? Like, because right, not everyone needs to work on their IP.
Yeah. So I guess what you're asking is like, how do you find these organizations or whatever? Yeah.
Like,
so I think there's plenty of ones that are already existing. So I actually encourage people not to start their own or like get a group of friends and start their own. But I think there's quite a few organizations that are already doing good work. And I think that part of that is like political education and understanding like what's happening underneath, and why is my healthcare tied to my job? Why is like my ability to live tied to the place I live in, and why can I be evicted at a moment's notice if I just can't pay for one month? Like these are deep questions in a society that I think I found a lot of education from the organizational work I'm doing. But again, I think people should look to what's going on in their local communities, obviously, but having a good political analysis and kind of like understanding of the world is key. So studying history, studying politics, and for me that looks like organizing with the PSL. So, and they're a national organization. So I just found I'm with their Los Angeles branch, and I actually heard about them when I was in Utah. So
oh wow.
Yeah,
it's really interesting too, like Esther, the way you had framed that. It's just like that's your personal project.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, because like so often I hear artists like just talk about what they're doing, and a lot of it was just a spike of kind of like this activity around when the protests were really happening. And I feel like a lot of people didn't continue that work just because it's like, okay, I want to get back to the original program.
Like myself, or like what I had going on before this, or returning back to normal, quote unquote.
Yeah, exactly. So like, what would you suggest of like, if like there's artists who want to help, right? And like I know that obviously that's one of the ways that you can kind of help get back to your community is join an organization. What else would you suggest for any artist who wants to help, the cause and help with diversity and just help with, just making the world a better place to live in?
I think there's some really good power in, unionizing your workplace and being able to like, in LA, we have the animation guilds that we all kind of fall under, but even just building those connections with your coworkers and knowing that like, oh, for example, let's say your studio is doing something that you disagree with, either, hiring somebody who's unsafe for your workplace, or takes on a project that goes against, the standards and practices you would want to see implemented. you and your coworkers could unionize and go against that decision, right? And, you know, literally withhold your labor if that's what you wanted to do to, you know, combat that, if that was the best method. But I think building, again, a safe community within an art space, and I think Drawing While Black has been like really inspirational to building those connections. I think there's a few other ones like Latinx Create and a few others like hashtags that have like, you know, we're seeing these connections between artists, but we're also seeing, you know, a reaction to that. And there's like a whole other side of things going against that. But, you know, we just do the best we can to, you know, educate and do our best and grow together. So,
yeah, I'm sure those efforts have been working really well too. And, you know, it's fulfilling in a way to be able to do it. Just speaking from my own experience, and you know, it sounds like it's the same for you. So yeah, thank you for doing that. Like, I just really appreciate when I can hear like about artists that are actively contributing back. So, you know,
try my best.
Yeah, I know it can be difficult sometimes, and I'm curious too. It's just like when you do, you know, your activism work as well as your your professional work. Like, how do you balance all that? Like, how do you keep everything kind of like on board? And you inhale because this is like, am I balancing?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I think the it's like everything else. It comes down to that time management and understanding. You know, you have to prioritize and say, this is what I can do right now, and know that, at least for me in my organization and the PSL, like I know somebody else can pick up the work if I'm unable to do it. And so I have to be very clear about drawing boundaries, about saying, this is what I have time for, this is what I don't have time for. If I don't have time for it, somebody else is going to have to step in and do it. And, you know, obviously I want to find somebody who can fill that role. And it's the same way in the workplace. I feel like, you know, if I'm on a background painting team, and if I'm unable to complete an assignment, you know, I need to let my coordinators know so that we can plan for that in the future, and make sure that doesn't happen again. Or if a fellow background painter is struggling on something, like maybe I can take on some of their work if I finish fast enough, you know. So
that's cool. Yeah, delegation, or just like even if you can't delegate, but just like knowing your limits is really key, I think. It's a hard lesson to learn sometimes for a lot of people, just on how to ask for help, or just like how to understand what your limits are, or that you can't take on all of it all at once. It's definitely something that I've had to learn. It sounds like you've had to learn it too through all of your experiences. Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that. For sure.
One thing that's cool too is I think like you can bring all this stuff back into your art, right? So like
Yeah.
I've gone through periods where some of the times where I learned the most about art is when I stopped drawing, you know, and like go live my life, go travel, go like experience things, right? I don't have to be inside drawing digitally all day. I don't have to be you know, just constantly working on my crafts. I can go like pull from life experiences, and then when I come back, I'm like, I have a new I don't know, a new facet of learning that I can apply to, you know, my drawings and apply to my art. And it all starts to blend together where it produces something new, or almost like chaotic. And then, you know, you can refine that as it comes back to, you know, what you're focused on or what your focus is. So.
I'm so glad you said that, because I feel like the years that I was like not living life and just cranking out art is probably some of the most boring stuff I ever made. And it's just, I think a lot of people need to hear that, because like we're talking about too, that it's like everybody's competing to get to the top or to get to a certain level like super fast, and you got to take time to live your life, you know, and to experience things. And especially if you want to say something with your work, and hearing about everything that you're doing with organizing and stuff, like that is part of you. Like I love that, again, that Esther said that it's like a personal project, because it kind of is, you know, it's like it all informs everything that you're making. And yeah, it's just, I think it's really, really important that the younger artists hear that as well, because it's so easy to get caught up in just working and cranking out, you know, cranking out work. So
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something, I have a lot of friends who are artists or creatives. And so between all of us, you know, it's finding, again, that balance between inspiration, creativity, work ethic, and blending all these things together to, you know, really define what do you want to do, right? Nobody says you don't have to be productive all the time, right? It's like, why do I have to be drawing constantly? And like, you know, I don't want to like hurt my wrist or like hurt my back or something long term just because you're paying in spades now. You know, it's like you could slow down, take a breather, you know, recompose and do this in a more efficient manner. And I'm not saying like don't work hard or something like that, but it's like truly assess yourself. And that's like almost like everybody's going to set their own introspective like level of how they're going to engage with their own art. And it's a journey. It's been a fun journey for me. And I've been every single person I've recommended not to be. I've like I've made all the mistakes, and I think I think that's a good thing, right? We want to make mistakes because we learn from them. But yeah, I'm just trying to have fun too. So.
Yeah, we make all the mistakes so we can give the good advice, because we know exactly what what this will cost us of pulling the all-nighters and hurting ourselves and trying to draw from an empty well, and just like completely just being burnt out from trying to do all the time. Because a lot of artists that I've met and just I've seen, they'll be drawing all the time, and then they'll say it's like, oh, like I just can't draw right now, like I feel like I'm so unproductive. I feel like I'm so lazy. And I'm like, you're not lazy. You're burnt out. Go outside and do something else. Don't do this the whole time. It's not healthy for you. You can't always just draw from one source. You have to kind of like absorb what the world is around you in order to really be an effective artist or your best kind of self. So, just being able to balance that with, the actual things that you're doing, activism work and, any other things, that's really important. But I'm curious, what else, how do you fill your will? What else, what do you geek out about is what I'm asking
I love it.
you.
This is a great question. So I think towards the end of my art center time, I was like feeling pretty comfortable with my art. And like, I was like, okay, I've gotten to a point where I like drawing and I'm comfortable enough that I can draw what I want to draw often. And so I was like, let me try learning something new. And the first thing I chose was kickboxing. I started doing Muay Thai kickboxing, and I was terrible. I was out of shape. I was like, I went to the gym first day and I was like, here's the money for the first month. And they're like, you sure you don't want to like do a test day? And I was like, no, if I don't give you this money right now, like I'm not gonna commit. So I'm just like, commit. So it was expensive, but at the same time, like I started working out a lot more. I started doing a little bit of training, a little bit of boxing. I was terrible. And after the first like 6 months, I had learned a lot, and I did my first like little exhibition fight. Did terribly, but again, it's like I came a long way in 6 months just by, it felt like learning how to draw for the first time again. I was like, oh wow, this is what it feels like to be terrible at something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like being in a video game like level 1 or something, and you're like, every level up feels so good because it's like you're just like breaking down barriers. It's like a struggle, but you can progress so much. And then I feel like I don't know, like we talk about, I also teach. And so like, I talk about this like art process where like you have like a 0 to like 90%. That's like a whole journey of like art, but then 98 to 95% is like just as long as that first 90%. And then 95% to 96% is like just as long as all of that rest of it put together. And it's like, to get to the highest levels of mastery of something is extremely difficult. And so I like, again, taking time to learn how to learn and learn something new every couple of years. So like Muay Thai was my thing for a while, and then I did a little bit of boxing when I was in Australia. And then when I came back to the States, I actually got knocked out once while I was in Australia. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to take a pause on this. I want to save my brain for the future. So I still did a little bit of training, but then I kind of dropped on the Muay Thai and started doing competitive video games. So I started playing Super Smash Brothers Melee. And so that was like my fun thing, my little hobby on the side. So I'd still do my art and stuff. And then this would be like, when I have an extra a couple hours, I'll practice in this. And then I started going to like tournaments, and I met a bunch of new people that way. Some of them who are artists, some of them who are not, and like made a bunch of friends in Utah that way, and reconnected with like my cousins through that game. And we would like fly out to national tournaments together, and like it would just be like a party,
so cool.
For like, I mean, it's like super nerdy, right? But it's fine. It's like we're just enjoying ourselves. And then after I dropped that's when I started again like politically organizing, and then I started taking that a little bit more seriously. And like each phase, right, is just like learning, mastering something new, getting efficient at it and proficient at it. And then once I feel like good about it, I'm like, okay, I can set this down and I want to learn something else. But always art is in the background, and always art is like my main focus. And these things are like feeding into my art. So the way when I learned how to fight better, I started doing like more fighting or workout art or something like that. And that's like a direct influence. But then like there's also another level of like mentality of like, oh, I felt good doing this thing while I was boxing. Let me try applying that same kind of thinking or creativity in a boxing match to my art piece, right? And I don't know how to explain it better than that, other than like it's a completely mental like hurdle. So
Yeah, it's just a way of changing your mindset to think about art in a different way, which is,
it's problem solving.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really cool. And it's really important to be able to do that and problem solve in different ways than just from purely doing art alone. You learn so much just from having all these different experiences. You really do. And I have a few questions too. Who is your main in Smash?
All right, in Super Smash Brothers Melee, I mained Marth, and in Ultimate, I was playing Pokemon Trainer and Inkling. So
yes. Oh my god.
I know, I'm annoying.
You're so annoying. Oh man, when in Melee, I mained Roy, so I would have loved to fight you. You probably would have just wiped the floor with me because
hey,
we can
good,
play.
But I wasn't. What?
Basic.
I cannot believe you. Basic. Who's your main?
Marth. Marth and Meta Knight and Brawl, dude.
Nice.
God.
Just Esther throwing shade.
All right, we're gonna have to have a little miniature tournament within just us here.
Oh no, I'm terrible now. I haven't played in so long.
I'll bring the popcorn.
You probably had all of your professional skills still like carried over. Like I haven't.
I was terrible.
Years.
I mean, this is the interesting thing, right? I played that game competitively for like 2 years, and I would still like that game has such a long history that. There was a number 1 player in Utah that I lost to the first tournament I went to. He force-stalked me, so he basically killed me without me taking a single life from him on my first tournament. I'm like, okay, that's expected. I'm terrible, whatever. A year or 2 years later, I think I played him again in another tournament match. He force-stalked me again. Like that's just how good this player is. So I was like, all right, that's just I don't have enough time to dedicate to get to your level,
It requires a lot of effort and dedication.
But I feel that way about art too, right? There's so many art like inspirations and like people that I love who are like, I always feel like I have so much to learn from, and they put out a new piece or something, and I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. I probably wouldn't have solved something in the exact same way, but it gives me an inspiration as to like how I can apply it to myself. And like you watch a good film, you watch a good play a good game. I'm playing Last of Us 2 right now, so it's
nice.
So much inspiration and all the creativity that goes into art direction and character design and all these games. It's amazing. So
yeah, they're absolutely beautiful. Like I really want to play Last of Us, but I'm also really scared.
It's not that bad. No, I'm just kidding. It is. No.
It's pretty, because I played the first one and I was just like, this is a lot. This is really a lot, but it's a fantastic game. But you also had mentioned something interesting too, and I really like the way you put this. But you said basically learning how to learn again, and I always love that because a lot of the artists friends that I know, or just even me, it's really hard for us who have this thing that we've been working at for so long to start from level 1 again, and to start from just like we don't know anything, we don't know what we're doing. It's a really uncomfortable place to be. So, to be able to hear that you are willing to go that route and that journey is really inspiring to me to hear. And like, I guess, like, what's your advice for kind of like people overcoming that hurdle of just being really bad at something?
Revel in the slowness. That's always my advice, is like, you're gonna have to enjoy it. And it's like pulling teeth, right? I am learning Blender right now, and for me that program is like, it's like I'm like so frustrated, like why can't I just do what I want to do? Like I know what I want to do mentally, but I don't have the skill set to apply it in a 3D program sometimes. So it's like whether it's animation or like there's so many different aspects to learn, and so in that process I think my advice is usually to enjoy being bad at something, and like find people who are better than you, who can help you, who can not even better than you, just like who are as dedicated as you, right? Because if you're both in it together, it's almost like you're in it together, right? You're kind of in the trenches together and you're enjoying something you know, it might not even be enjoyable on the surface, but the enjoyment comes from sharing, you know, the achievement with somebody else, or sharing, you know, a new technique or something with somebody else. So I have my sibling, Scott Zenteno. They're an amazing artist as well, and so I've had them throughout my life. That, you know, we push each other, and we're like, we used to fight all the time when we were younger, but when we hit like, I think like 14, 15, we became like best friends, and so we played in a band together. We like did art together. Their focus, like their true passion, has always been like music, or like that's been like their core, I guess. For me, that's always been art. So we kind of like overlap in art, and we talk about a lot of different things, and just, yeah, again, learning and growing together and having a fun time through life is super important, because it's just like, life's too short, right? I don't want to, if I'm doing something, I want to do it to the best of my ability, and if I'm doing something else, I want to enjoy it. So that's how I'd approach like being bad at something, is like, understand that you're going to be bad, accept it, and then build off that foundation that you already have. So, and if your foundation is zero, that's great. You get to pick something as your new foundation, right?
I like that a lot. Amazing. That's really helpful. Yeah, also I found their Twitter from looking at your Twitter. And I was looking at the profile. I was like, I wonder if that's like, if they're related. And so I'm glad that that's confirmed. Like, that's really cool, because their work is awesome too. So you know, maybe I'll also get them on the podcast. That would be amazing to talk
Oh yeah, that would be great. They're super fun to interview. They have a very different worldview than me. It's like, or not super different as much as like, they arrive at a lot of similar conclusions, but their process of thinking is completely different than mine. I'm very like emotional, and I go off intuition. They're very logic based. So
it must be really cool to also grow up around that, though, because you have that different perspective to draw from as well. I mean, was that helpful for you, or is that a part of like where you clashed?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you this. When I was in high school, I was freaking out at one point, because in my product design class, I was assigned like, oh, we have to do like 40 drawings by next week or something, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm gonna do 40 drawings. I'm like, I haven't done this many, like, to this level, this quality. I start like spiraling, right? I'm spiraling. And then Scott, they're in middle school at the time. They're like, just do 5 a day and you'll make it by this time period. You know, I'm like, oh wow, well, like, you're a genius.
I see they're given the gift of time management early somehow.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Man,
so I was like, oh wow, okay, thank you. So
that's incredible.
Just breathe, you know.
Yeah, it's just like, take a beat, it's okay. Oh, that's really nice to have that. Somebody who's just like, what are you talking about? You're fine. Like, just handle it as it comes. That's really cool. Yeah, I like that.
I've learned a lot about like grounding myself, like from them, essentially. So
yeah, that is really awesome. Well, Thomas, is there anything that you want to talk about or plug right now? Anything you want to tell you know, our viewers? Leave them with any parting advice or anything that you want to talk about?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I should talk about the show I'm on right now. It's called Middlemost Post. So it's a really cute show by Nickelodeon. We're in our first season, doing the background painting with Susan Young right now, and she's an amazing artist. I love my coworkers. Like, the team's really cool, and you know, the whole team has pretty much formed during the pandemic. So we haven't really got to meet in person. And again, speaking of like small art community, Eric Lechtenberg, who's another storyboard artist, like, we connected in Utah. He was living in Salt Lake at the same time, and we met at CTN, you know, Expo. And so it's just so funny to like, again, it's like, we met in LA, we both lived in Utah, we started hanging out over there, and then like now we're both working on our project here on Nickelodeon, and he moved out here to LA. So it's like, the world is a small place, especially the art community. So and I think, I support other artists. Obviously, if you're looking for advice or looking for a mentor, you know, there's a lot of people who are willing to do it, but you know, be willing to put in the work as a mentee as well. Like, you know, follow up. You know, be kind and thankful to these people who are taking the time out of their day to respond or be helpful to you. And I try to respond to as many things as I can. I actually teach at Art Center during the summers, usually for like 1 month. It's like an intensive class, and so we have, I think, 100 and some students that have gone through there between myself and my sibling. I taught it for like, I think, 8 years now.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
it's really fun, and like a lot of these people are now, some of them are now in the industry. Chris Howard, Christina Yang, they're like, working at like amazing studios, doing amazing work. And I'm just so proud of like, to see students come that far, and it's amazing, really. So, yeah.
Thomas, where can people find you if they want to see your work?
Yeah, so if you want to find me, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and you can find me at Thomas Zenteno. I also have a YouTube channel that is not updated regularly, but one day I'll get some more tutorials up there, and that's just you can just search me, Thomas Zenteno, on YouTube. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you so much for spending time with us, Thomas, and talking to us today.
Thanks
this was
for
awesome.
inviting me. So
yeah, absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as we did. But we'll catch you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.